Hey, it's Colleen.
Hi, it's Kate.
And it's Megan.
And we're the
Three Scheme Queens. Join us as we discuss popular hoaxes and give you our comedic take on what is fact and what is fiction. If you have a sense of humor and an open mind, come take this journey with us.
We'll tell you what we think, and we'll try to prove it to you.
Is this thing on?
Hey, guys.
Hey, folks.
Guys, what's up?
What is poppin'?
Crack a
Lackin'.
We hope you enjoyed our season finale.
Season.
Also, our season finale.
Yeah.
Season.
We
Our
talked
very first season, guys. This is
Guys.
a milestone.
How many episodes have we done?
37.
Wow.
That's pretty good. I'm
I
proud.
can't even count that high.
How many times did we say, let's not do this anymore?
5.
Yeah.
It was like, do we want to do this? And then I think at one point, every one of us said, do we still want to do this? And the other two rallied. So it wasn't like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like we all were, it was just,
Yeah.
We're just tiring. It was a lot of work doing this. Like just figuring out the audio part for Megan, the editing part for Megan.
most of the work, Megan.
The 20 minutes a week I would spend Googling my topics,
I think mostly it's just the schedule.
the scheduling of
But
it.
guys,
Yeah.
we have some big news.
Big news.
Big news.
Kate
Yes.
has graduated.
Oh
graduate.
my gosh.
Which means that when we come back for season 2,
She'll be refreshed and not have dark
gonna-
circles under her eyes.
She's gonna present every episode.
you're going to hear a lot more from Kate.
Yes.
And she's going to be all over social media.
And don't you worry, guys. I really know how to research some topics. now.
Start putting in your requests for Kate now.
Yeah.
Because she's gonna have so much free time
So much free
to
time.
look them up.
You should see her to-do list.
It's so
I
overwhelming
always think
already.
she's such an idea girl, and I'm like, how about some execution? And I cannot wait to see
The execution.
The follow through?
the follow-through.
Yeah. We'll see if it happens.
So to commemorate Kate's graduation,
We're
Yeah.
going on a big one.
we're going on a trip.
A big trip.
Yeah.
Where are we going, Colleen?
We are going to Egypt.
Egypt.
This was a requested episode. Throwback when. This was requested by my brother Timothy. On Instagram, he left a comment saying he'd like to hear about the aliens and the pyramids.
Oh.
So in order to do this, the three of us are traveling to Egypt together.
We're going on an excursion.
An excursion. We're going to hop on the Philadelphia ship, jump through time to get to the pyramids.
Yeah. I hope we get to meet Brendan Fraser in The Mummy. at
Yeah.
some point.
Oh my God, I love that movie. We're going to learn about the aliens. I'm going to learn about cats. Megan's going to have some drinks and relax.
I just want to say that Egypt is a bucket list place, so I'm excited.
I'm mostly scared about crossing the road. Have you seen the videos? Like cars don't stop for
Oh.
pedestrians.
Are we?
I will
I
die.
thought we were just going to be like on camel.
Yeah, we're going to take camels.
Camels.
Where do camels get their humps from?
Water. I don't know.
Yeah.
Water's in it.
Yeah.
Is that a joke?
No,
Oh.
that was just a real question.
So everyone enjoy the rest of your summer.
We'll be in Egypt.
And join us back here on September 3rd after Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, after the kids go back to school.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the pyramids. But in the meantime, we're going to do some re-releases for you. So,
yeah.
Kate, since you are the graduate, why don't you launch us off?
Yes. Oh my gosh, launch off. So yeah, we are all, I guess we're all like going to pick our favorite episodes and re-release. And my favorite episode is the MH370 episodes. They're part 1 and part 2. I guess they're my favorite episodes, I think, because I don't think anyone will ever know what actually happened to the plane. And I think it's so interesting how there are so many theories that will just never come to fruition. And so it was really interesting to listen to the episode. And I think Megan did such a good job with her research. I remember vividly, I think it was January. It was cold. It was cold outside. We were sitting here at Megan's apartment or Megan's house, and it was getting dark outside, and Megan and I had to like get on the road to go somewhere. Yeah. I just remember, I think we were like, okay, we'll record, 2 more episodes or whatever. And it was like really dark. And like Megan started talking about this podcast, and I just was hooked immediately. And just, I think usually Colleen and I, like if we ever do like a day where we record most of the episodes, Colleen and I lose interest. Yeah, we get very ADHD, as you probably know. And anyway, but these were like the last 2 episodes that we record during the day, and we were hooked.
We were really hooked.
I think that it is probably like prime content. We do a lot of like heavy stuff, and we do a lot of lighthearted stuff. This is more of a heavy episode, a heavy 2 episodes. But yeah, my favorite episodes, definitely go check them out. Megan did such a good job on them.
So, okay. So, yeah, everybody take a listen to MH370. It's coming up now.
Part 1 and part 2.
Yeah. Let's get hooked.
See, and then join us next week for my favorite episode. See you next Tuesday. Just a reminder, guys, don't forget to check out our Facebook and Instagram pages at 3 Scheme Queens. That's the number 3 Scheme Queens, all one word. We're also on Reddit, same username. If you want to check out our website, go to 3schemequeens.com, and you can find links to our social media accounts, our Buzzsprout page, all of our episodes, additional content, our contact page, and our discussion board, where you can engage with us and share any updates about the topics that we've discussed. Let us know how we're doing and what you want to hear next. There are also opportunities to financially support us. There are links to buy us a cup of coffee, links to our recently updated merch store, and affiliate links. And as always, if you choose not to financially support us, we appreciate the follows, the downloads, the listens, the likes.
Yeah. And if you guys don't mind, after this podcast is done, just go ahead and scroll down to the bottom. Leave us a 5-star review, please. It just like helps us get our name out there and sort of boost our listenership. So yeah. Or if you feel so led, give us a comment.
Yeah. Little love letter.
We love a love letter.
I do.
So is it time for our
drink check? Drink check.
What you got over there, Colleen?
I'm drinking a couple of different things. I got a little coffee, got a little water, I'm bouncing in between. You know what I mean?
She's drinking around.
Yeah.
I've got some good old fashioned dihydrogen monoxide.
I cannot.
Boring.
Yeah. I've got a Waterloo summer berry mix.
Waterloo.
To be clear, I purchased the Waterloo summer berry mix in the month of January.
Yeah, very interesting to me.
Because it's, kind of a patriotic can.
Yeah, it is.
But delicious.
Merca.
Would you guys agree? Delicious?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. All right, guys, we've got quite a mystery today.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. Travel plans, Megan?
Oh, yeah. I don't have a lot of fears of flying or the water, but something about this case really does terrify me. Just like the vastness of the ocean, the vastness of the sky, and the fact that a plane can just disappear.
Yeah, terrifying.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
So let's get into it and see what you guys think. On March 8th, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 took off in the early hours of the morning as the red-eye flight from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia with an intended destination of Beijing, China. There were 227 passengers on board with 12 crew members. The pilot command, 53-year-old Captain Zaharie Shah, was performing a final instructional flight for 27-year-old co-pilot, First Officer Fariq Hamid. And the flight was initially uneventful at a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The flight was leaving Malaysian Air Space and was instructed to transfer to the air traffic control tower in Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam. At 1:19, Captain Shah radioed the air traffic controllers in Malaysia, "Good night, Malaysian 370." That was the last verbal contact with anyone on the plane.
Boom, boom, boom.
Approximately 103 seconds later, the aircraft went dark and vanished from all radar screens in Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, and Ho Chi Minh City.
Oh my gosh.
There were 2 transponders on board the plane. So to disappear, both transponders would need to cease functioning either by catastrophic failure or by manual override by someone on the plane. It was over 20 minutes before anyone noted the plane was missing. It did not arrive for its 6:30 a.m. ETA and only had enough fuel to fly until about 8:15 a.m. The most expensive search and rescue operation in aviation history was initiated. To this day, we do not know where the airplane is or what happened to the 239 souls on board. An extensive safety report was released, which did not answer many questions and did have inconclusive findings. They denied suspecting any crew was involved and reported that air traffic controllers were delayed in noting the missing plane. Theories vary from a hijacking or suicide mission to a military operation, and a plethora of questions still exist. One thing is for sure. Evidence of shoddy investigative work and potential cover-ups abound. What really happened to MH370 in the early mornings of March 8th, 2014?
Whoa.
Well, there's a lot going on that I did not realize.
Yeah. I mean, I remember this being like big, I guess maybe when I was like 24 and my parents were talking about this Malaysian airplane and I was like, what is the big deal? But like doing more research, I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I remember hearing about it on the news, but I just thought it was another plane crash, but it is not.
It is not. Okay. I know you guys watched some documentaries. You don't have a ton of knowledge on this, but you have a background. So what is your initial assessment of what you guys think happened to this plane?
Okay. Well, I think that it was probably a hijacking, like from someone from another country was trying to hijack the plane or something. I don't know the reason, but I also feel like the plane was hijacked because it doesn't make sense that a pilot with just like so much knowledge and experience would just like veer off course. Like that seems pretty strange.
Yeah. How about you, Colleen?
I'm between a couple of thoughts. My first thought was that one of the documentaries brings up like a fire or some kind of crisis, but then like on the plane. But then my other thought was maybe like a health crisis with the pilots, but communication on the radio is making me lean maybe towards that it was like maybe deliberate. But I don't think it was a hijack situation. I think it was like maybe a possible suicidal situation. I know we all have these reports saying how healthy the captain was and everything like that, but it's just like, that's just what people saw. So my thought is maybe he purposefully crashed it.
Oh,
Okay. Well, you guys do have kind of like the 2 predominant theories, which are like suicide, murder-suicide, or a hijacking. I actually have a different theory than both of you, but I'm going to save that for the end.
Oh, suspenseful.
So there's a lot of information. I'm going to try to sum it all up as succinctly as possible, but you ladies keep me on track in case any of this gets confusing. Because again, I've watched like 18 different documentaries on this. I do want to say that the first one I watched was the Netflix documentary, which I thought was really interesting. Then I went down the Reddit rabbit hole and I learned pretty quickly that a lot of the people in that documentary are like not great sources. Also, a lot of the family members and friends that are in that documentary are in a lot of other documentaries. So it's pretty interesting. Let's just start by getting into the characters and the people on the flight.
All right, Megan, who was there?
The pilot in charge was Captain Zaharie Shah. He was 53, married with 3 children, and one of the most senior pilots working for the airline, beginning his career with them in 1983. He had been flying the Boeing 777 since 1998 and worked as an instructor and examiner since 2007. So he's pretty high up there. I read that maybe he had like 1,000 fewer flying hours than Sully, who landed on the Hudson. So yeah, pretty senior guy. He had 18,355 hours of flying under his belt, and in multiple documentaries, they had his friends and family and fellow employees who all said he was very professional. He was like one of the best across the board. They said there's no way that there could have been any kind of malicious intent on his part or any involvement on his part. And the official report that the Malaysian government released, again, about 4.5 years after the fact, said that there was really no evidence of any kind of financial issues, no mental health issues, no personal issues. And so they didn't really blame him. They said there was no evidence of any kind of wrongdoing on his part. But there have been some rumors in some of the documentaries that perhaps that's not all accurate.
Oh,
Perhaps he did have some marital issues. There was this Atlantic article that interviewed an anonymous fellow pilot, an alleged lifelong friend. I say like alleged because I think you all would take my secrets to the grave. But he's just out here like sharing them anonymously with the world. But he claims that Captain Shah had a bad marriage and had slept with multiple flight attendants.
Wow.
No.
His friend said, and I quote, "We all do. You're flying all over the world with these beautiful girls in the back." But his wife knew. Like, okay, no accountability for the men, right? Like, they can't help it. There's just beautiful girls in the back. What are they supposed to do?
Yeah, no, that's crazy.
That's disgusting, actually. You can't control yourself.
Yeah, get it together. But again, that's all just rumors because everywhere else people were like, what are you talking about? He had a great marriage. I think we do know that at the time this all happened, he was apparently living separately from his wife. They owned 2 homes and they were each living in a separate home. So they also talk about, I think in a couple of articles, that he was just kind of an awkward dude. He'd engaged in some one-sided flirting with other women on Facebook and social media. And he would just like DM these girls and they wouldn't respond. And he was just kind of awkward about it. So that's not good.
Gross.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Like cringe, right, Colleen?
Yeah,
Cringe.
major cringe.
Is that an ick?
That's a major ick.
Yeah.
Some people said that he was just like in this empty house alone. His kids were full grown. His wife's living in another house. And so he would just kind of like pace around the empty rooms waiting for his next flight. They also said he spent a lot of time on social media, like I said, and we know that can be associated with like feelings of isolation, depression. So perhaps he did have some problems. It's really hard for us to say.
Maybe a little mentee bee.
Ooh,
you know what I
mentee
mean?
bee.
Like,
Maybe not unlike Princess Diana.
yeah.
They also looked at the CCTV at the airport on the day of the flight and then the 3 flights he'd been on prior. So they see him and his co-pilot going through security, going to board the plane, and they found no significant behavioral changes. He was well groomed. He looked appropriate, normal characteristics like a normal gait, posture, mannerisms, that kind of thing. So nothing popping up right away other than these rumors, I guess, about like his mental state and the state of his marriage. But really, we have no other indication that he knew anything was going to happen or that he was involved in any way. So that's him. This is the crew member. So they thought that if a crew member was involved, he's probably the most likely just because he was such a smart guy. He had so much aviation knowledge. So he's probably the one person on board from the crew, at least, who could potentially have the ability to make this plane disappear if anyone could do it.
But like, he's so cute. Did you see his YouTube videos? I mean, he's like this like cute little nerdy guy. And what is he doing? He's like, he like opens up his YouTube video and he's doing his like community service.
Yeah, he called it my community service.
He's very cute. So it's like kind of like hard to believe that somebody like that would be like malicious.
Yeah. And then we have his first officer. So his first officer was Fariq Hamid. He was 27. He'd been flying with Malaysia Airlines since 2007, and he had previously been the first officer on the 737 and the Airbus A330. In November 2013, he began training as first officer of the Boeing 777, and this was his last training flight. He had 2,753 hours of flying experience, and he was engaged to be married to another pilot. They also reported that he had no financial, personal, mental issues, anything like that would put him at risk of being involved. So he was also cleared in the report that comes out about 4.5 years later. But overall, people thought, again, like, this guy only had 39 hours on this plane. He's pretty novice when you compare him to the pilot in command. So really unlikely that he would have intentionally been involved in this. So again, we have these 2 pilots, and then we had the 10 additional crew members who were all on the back end. So these 10 flight attendants are all Malaysian, and then there's 227 passengers on board. And these passengers come from a variety of different backgrounds. The majority of them were Chinese citizens, and then the remainder, again, from a variety of different locations. So I think the family members of all the passengers and crew really wanted answers for what happened. But again, I think there's like a lot of protests, a lot of issues with these 104 Chinese passengers, family members being upset with the way the whole situation was handled by the Malaysian government. I'm not really sure about the relationship between the countries before this.
Well, hold on a second. Google says that Malaysia and China are actually really big trading partners. Like, apparently China is Malaysia's #1 trade partner, and Malaysia is China's second largest trading partner, which is interesting to me. I didn't know that.
That's very interesting.
So I guess we assume prior to this that maybe they had a pretty good relationship, it sounds like, at least they're trading. I don't know.
Right.
I would say later there were definitely a lot of Chinese protests, I guess, regarding the investigation and what happened. But anyway, those are our players. So now let's talk about the timeline and what we do know. So I kind of went through some of it in the introduction, but as a reminder, at 12:41 a.m., the flight departed Kuala Lumpur and is bound for Beijing. We can hear the transmission of the air traffic control tower in flight MH370. I was going to play a clip here, but it's kind of difficult to understand because there's air traffic control language, there's some accents. So We'll have Colleen post that for you. Again, it's just kind of difficult to understand without the closed captioning. So I'm going to summarize it. So because this was a training flight, the pilot in command was actually handling the communications once the plane took off. So the co-pilot handles radio transmission on the ground. Now he's going to fly this plane, and all the radio transmission in flight is going to be between Captain Shah and the air traffic controllers. So 12:41, we depart. At about 1:08 a.m., MH370 reports to air traffic control that they have reached their cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, and that's flight level 350.
It kind of blows my mind how much air there is before space. Like, it makes me feel like I'm in like some kind of simulation.
Yeah.
Wait, you've never thought about that before?
No.
I like all the things too that Kate's always like, wait, that never occurred to you? That never occurred to you? No. Until we did this
functioning anxiety.
Yeah. I'm like, whoa.
Until we did this podcast, I had never even thought about the ocean as anything more than like a trip to the beach. And now it just creeps me out every time I think about it.
Scary.
Oh, yeah. Like watching the clip of the Titanic just like go under.
I can't.
Terrifying. That's why I don't want to go on a cruise. I don't want to be surrounded on all sides by water and all you can see is the horizon. No, I can't. No.
But anyway, back on track. So at 1:01 and then 1:07, he reports that he's at cruising altitude 350. And I guess that's abnormal because it was like unnecessary information for him to provide the air traffic controller, let alone provide that same information multiple times.
Oh, wait a second. Like, they're not supposed to do that?
I guess they don't need to report their actual cruising altitude.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So that is really weird.
Yeah. So at 1:19 a.m., air traffic control says to MH370, Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. So what they're saying here is that they were leaving Malaysian Air Space and they were being passed off to the air traffic controllers in Vietnam. So now Vietnam should pick them up in theory and kind of that's who they're going to be communicating with. That's kind of who's responsible for them, which is part of this whole mystery because this specific spot where this all happened was sort of like a convergence point, like an intersecting point of about 7 different airspaces. So it's a lot of different areas of responsibility in a small geographical location. So like if you were ever going to try to go missing, this is probably like the perfect place to do it.
Like the Bermuda Triangle of air traffic?
Oh, yeah, that sounds like it.
Yeah.
So again, we'll have Colleen post a picture online of the airspace, but you should be able to see how difficult it would be for people to really be able to tell like who's controlling who's responsible for this flight. And you could easily just assume that someone else is kind of, managing them, supervising them. So at 1:18 a.m., air traffic control says, Malaysia 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9, good night. And then Captain Shah responds immediately, good night, Malaysian 370, which first of all, when you hear him say that, it like gives me chills every time because that is the last contact anyone outside the plane ever had with anyone on the plane.
Whoa.
Yeah. That's freaky.
Yeah. But also what's wrong about this is that he's supposed to read back that radio channel. So what he should have said was Malaysian 370 will contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9, good night.
Oh, and he didn't do that.
No, he just says like, good night, Malaysian 370. So that was an inappropriate response and leaves out that closed loop communication about the radio frequency of the Ho Chi Minh air traffic controllers. So that's our radio contact. So that's at 1:18 a.m. And then the last transponder communication is at 1:21 a.m.
Okay, so like as a captain who has like crazy experience, like it's training some other captain, he should like know better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting that he repeated it back wrong, like almost kind of deliberate.
That's your feeling, eh?
Yeah.
I do want to say that there were multiple different sources that did voice analysis of this radio chatter to determine what Captain Shah was thinking. Like, was he distressed? Was he anxious? Whatever. I do know the Netflix documentary said that on that final transmission, he had a faster and higher pitch, and then he made that error. So, like, he obviously misspoke and kind of messed up. So they were implying like he was potentially nervous, could have been distracted or stressed. But then a lot of other sources that looked at the radio transmission didn't find any abnormality with the voice analysis. So they didn't find any kind of conclusive evidence that anything was abnormal at that point, aside from, again, that he repeated the inappropriate transmission early on. and then made an inappropriate transmission at the end. But the actual tone of his voice, the inflection, the rate he was speaking at, all of that, other sources have said there were no abnormalities. So again, we'll post that audio clip and you guys can decide for yourselves. So now I'm going to tell you about what we know about the flight course after we lost communication. And I just want to kind of explain up front that a lot of this data was developed with new research tools that hadn't previously been used. So when the flight first went missing, a lot of this information was not available on day one. So they would have like a little bit of information, they'd have that area, their search area, and then more information would come out. So they'd have to kind of reevaluate and shift that area. So obviously that would make the search very challenging. But I just want to be clear that when I go through the like what we think happened to this plane and the path it took, that information kind of slowly came out over quite a long period of time. So it was not all readily available early on. So again, this last known contact, when they were transferring over, they were supposed to transfer over to Vietnam's airspace. So they were between the South China Sea and the Gulf of Thailand. And that's where these transponders went out by either, again, a catastrophic event or by manual override. And initially, that was all the information that anyone had to go on. There was also a pilot who was a Malaysian airline pilot who I guess was like 30 minutes ahead of the MH370 flight. And he did say that he got a call on his emergency frequency that could have been MH370, but it was just a lot of interference and static. He thought he heard some mumbling on the other end, and this was just like right around the time of that blackout. But again, nothing ever really came of that. I guess I don't know how much that was investigated.
Oh, that's weird.
And then the Malaysian military comes forward and they go, you know what? We do have some technology. We have these long-range radars, which you guys said reminded you of Montauk.
Oh, those banana, like,
The
antenna things. Yeah.
This thing's so disturbing.
Talking to.
And so these radars, they don't rely on transponders. So they were able to get a little bit more information about the actual flight path.
Hold on. I have a theory that I just suddenly started thinking of. So maybe a suicidal mission, and I think it's still along that line, but I'm thinking that the captain was transporting something and felt like he had to purposely crash the plane. Like he knew that and wanted to protect everybody, so he purposely put the plane down. You know what I mean? That's what I just had to get that thought out there.
Oh.
Yeah, get it in there.
I also have another theory
Oh,
that involves black holes.
Okay.
oh God.
The plane just went through like a black hole, and that's why it disappeared. And that's why he tried to make an emergency call,
Oh, but we couldn't hear anything.
but they couldn't hear anything because the radio waves were like too distorted from the black hole.
Oh,
Did that happen in Loki?
it always goes back to Marvel.
No,
Okay.
I've been
She'd rather
listening to
Neither confirm nor deny.
yeah, just thinking about sci-fi things.
I mean, that is a theory that's been out there as like some kind of black hole or something.
Well, this emergency phone
like
call,
that.
I kind of forgot about that part because nobody brings it up again. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like they don't.
So again, the Malaysian military aircraft was able to see that this flight, when it lost contact, it then took a very abrupt turn to the right and made a very sharp U-turn.
A wicked sharp Yui.
Nice
Bang
name.
the Yui there.
Nice new accent, New England accent. Yeah, when I was in Boston, our driver kept saying, I'm going to bang a Yui. I'm banging a Yui.
That's not everybody says that.
I love it. But anyway, yeah, like why this Yui? It was so aggressive that it could not have been done on autopilot. It had to have been like manual.
Oh yeah, that had to have been manual.
Yeah. So they saw the plane veering and then making this U-turn to the left, heading back toward Kuala Lumpur. But it passed over just north of Kuala Lumpur, turned right at Penang Island, and then continued northwest up the Strait of Malaysia.
Yeah,
Again, we'll post a map.
We're gonna need a map for the people here.
Yeah. I think if you look at that picture, again, it makes the mystery even wilder. It's like a really crazy flight path.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like not a normal way at all.
Yeah. So again, the Malaysian military kind of lost the path of the plane after it turned right at Penang Island. But what is interesting to note is that the island, Penang Island, is where Captain Shah was born. So if you think he was involved, whether that was intentionally or unintentionally, if this was like planned or unplanned, whatever you think happened, if you think he was somehow involved and he knew he was going to die, there's a lot of theories that perhaps he wanted to kind of make one more pass past his home, look down and see the island where he was born and where he grew up.
Oh yeah, that played a part.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, I think about all the times we're on a commercial airplane and you're just in the back of this plane minding your own business and you have no idea what's going on. Like you don't even know where you are geographically. I guess unless you're like looking at the screen in front of you that has the flight path, you know, but it's just like a lot of trust. And this plane with almost 300 people can just like disappear. You could end up anywhere. You could have no idea. You're just in the back of the plane, like listening to a podcast, hopefully this podcast, maybe taking a nap, watching a movie, reading a book, and like you could just be anywhere.
Yeah, you got to have a lot of trust in your pilots there. Like, I didn't really think about it when I'm on a plane.
Kate's losing her mind right now.
Again, I cannot believe this is just occurring to you. This is what I think about every time I get on a
No
plane.
way.
I'm like, my life is literally in someone else's hands. I'm in this flying tube above the earth, and there's no way to get out, and it's pressurized, and it's and how does it fly?
Nah. When I get on a plane, I'm immediately scoping the people out who are with me, looking for my allies. You know what I mean? Like, if this plane went down, who am I grouping with and who am I eating?
Who are you like? Who can make a fire? Who can...
And who's going to taste the best?
Maybe a little bit. But also, side note, I'm the person on the plane constantly watching the flight path on the screen. I'm like, oh, Canada. Like,
I'm the person on the plane, like at the immediate, like when you hit turbulence, I'm the one that's like, we're all gonna die.
You don't just like look at the flight attendant, because if they're good, we're good.
Well, someone did tell me that recently, so I have started looking at the flight attendants. But I also grip the seats of the handles on my seats, like with white knuckles. It's fine.
Oh, okay. So the plane veers right, crosses over, goes kind of around the island, and then that's where the technology stops working. The SATCOM terminal that they were connected to was a ground station in Perth, Australia, and it kind of confirmed that the same path we got from that last piece of technology. So when it veered north, it made a U-turn, veered northwest, and then it lost contact with the SATCOM. And they were saying this could have been disabled within the cockpit by turning off the generator. And by doing that, it would also disable... Do you guys remember planes? They used to have before cell phones, they'd have the phones in the back of the seats in front of you for passengers to use.
Oh, yeah.
I think that like a lot of 9/11 people maybe used those to make their phone calls to their family. So you like put a credit card in and you could make the satellite phone call.
Goddamn.
Oh.
So if you disable the SATCOM, which you would do in the cockpit by turning off the generator, it would also disable all of the phone and text abilities for the passengers at their seats. So 3 minutes after it lost contact with the Malaysian military radar, the SATCOM logs back on, and then it kept connection or kept contact until 6 hours later, when we think the fuel should have run out. So during this time, 2 calls were made from the ground via the Perth ground station, but nobody ever answered on the plane. And then we have the Inmarsat. And so that's the International Maritime Satellite. If there's no contact, it does what it calls a handshake. So every hour it'll ping to the plane, just kind of like, hey, you there? Are you on? And so it pinged every hour. And that last ping was at 8:11 a.m. local time, which was 4 minutes before we think the fuel should have run out on this airplane. So we do know that as of 8:11 a.m., the plane was still in the air. But again, this information had never been used to actually track location, because it doesn't give you that information. It just kind of confirms like, hey, yeah, it was on. So when you're over the water, but you have to talk to the ground, you have to bounce that radio signal somehow, right? So you send this radio signal, it goes to a satellite, and then it gets relayed back to land and vice versa. So they analyze this data and they just calculate how long it would take to transmit that signal. And based on that, they were able to actually determine kind of a distance. So they make this like big semicircle, kind of like a circumference. And they're like, okay, somewhere in here is probably where that plane was at that time.
Oh, that's kind of cool. That's like Inmarsat is like a last ditch effort type of thing.
It just kind of sounds like a lot of geometry and math to me.
Yeah. And there were a lot of theories too, when we talk about the theories next week that exist, of people being like, oh, well, maybe someone hacked in and changed the data. But again, this data had never been used this way before. So I think that's incredibly unlikely. It was just this like one guy who works for Inmarsat, and he's just sitting at his coffee table and he was like, I'm watching the news and like, man, what can I do to help these guys? And he's the one who came up with this idea and did the calculation. So again, calculating how long it would take for that radio to transmit and use that information to determine a location was just this one guy doing a whole bunch of math at his table. And that's how we used it for the first time. I think it would require a lot of forethought for someone, even like a really smart pilot or a hijacker, to be like, oh, we need to rig this data just in case someone figures it out, you know?
What a guy. What a good Samaritan that guy was.
That's why you gotta marry nerds. Always.
Yeah. Shout out Bourbon Boy.
So then what else can I tell you about this data? Just kind of a side note, at 1:52 a.m., the co-pilot's cell phone did connect to a cell tower. Initially, rumors were he made a phone call or he received a phone call, but that's all now been kind of invalidated. We do know his phone did connect So I don't know if he just turned it on or what happened. But there's a theory that maybe he was trying to make a phone call. Just kind of adds to this whole mystery. But yeah, 1:52 a.m., this co-pilot's phone did come into contact with the cell tower.
Oh, I was like under the impression that maybe he wasn't trying to make a phone call, but he was like trying to figure out where they were.
Like Google Maps.
Yeah, like Google Maps.
Oh, I didn't think about
Google
that.
Maps in the air.
That's an interesting theory. Yeah, I didn't even think about it. But yeah, like if all the instrumentation is down and they don't know where they are.
Because how would you know where you are? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You
I
just
mean,
look up.
Yeah, I don't know if they have like night navigation where they're looking at the stars, or I don't know what kind of training they have. We'd have to ask Captain Fred. I did reach out to Captain Fred about his theory on this, though. And to be clear, I do have a lot of respect for pilots. I think there's a lot of responsibility. You've got the cost of the plane alone. It's a huge financial responsibility. And then you have all the lives on board, not to mention like the people that you could cause harm to not on the airplane. So I'm not trying to minimize that. I think, again, it's a lot of responsibility. But I was like, honestly, other than takeoff and landing, you guys can just like kind of set cruise control and kick back, right? Like there's not a lot of work happening at that point. And he kind of confirmed that, yeah, like you could mostly just cruise control.
Relax, yeah.
So I guess I just wanted to confirm that. And it's possible, other than that initial U-turn, that every other turn this airplane made could have all been done on cruise control. So it could have been on cruise control for 6 hours. Again, the plane did make a couple more settled turns after that initial sharp U-turn, which could have all been done on cruise control, but they would have had to have been programmed in advance. But yeah, it's possible maybe they just made this really sharp U-turn. Something happened. They wanted to go back to Kuala Lumpur after they made this sharp U-turn. Something happens and prevents them from landing or whatever. So I think it does make sense. And Captain Fred was with you guys that this was probably like a murder-suicide situation. But I have issues with that theory, which again, we'll get to. So this is kind of the end of the technology aspect of it. Again, I just want to kind of clarify that this was all the information they had to go on those initial searches. A lot of this information took many, many years to come out. And I want to tell you about the searches which got stopped. But more recent data in the last couple of years, they looked at what we call the whisper data. And so this looks at interruptions caused by aircraft passing through radio connections. So we talked about the radio waves at our lunar landing episode and how the reason that radio waves are able to travel so far in space is because there's nothing to block them. So now, though, if there's radio signals being transmitted and planes are flying through these paths where the radio signals are going, you're going to have these brief disruptions. And so they went back and they look at this and they said, okay, there were 160 disruptions in radio waves by something interfering. And so using that information, they were able to plot them out and make an estimate of the flight path.
Oh, that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
It's interesting how many directions they used to approach trying to figure out where this plane was.
Yeah, and like all these random people who just thought like, I have an idea. Let's track this thing or that thing.
Yeah.
So this just gave them some more specific information. And this is where we think, again, we now have the most specific information, best estimate of where this plane went down, if it did in fact go down in the ocean.
Boom, boom, boom.
And again, I think it went down in the ocean. Yeah. There's some other theories that like maybe it went north, but we'll get into that later. So they combine this whisper data with the information from the Western Australian Oceanography Group, which we also talk about later. They're interesting because they offered a lot of help to the Malaysians and the Malaysians turned them down. But they were helpful in eventually finding some alleged debris from the aircraft, which we'll get into. But this Oceanography Institute, it looks at the tides and looks at the whisper data, and they say like, okay, we think the plane went down here, and if that's where it went, and based on these tides, you should be able to find debris in this other location. Okay, so they would say if debris washes up in this location, we kind of backtrack and use that information to confirm where we think the plane is. So kind of incorporating all this information, it matched up. So again, we have our last ping, 8:11 a.m. We think 8:15-ish is when the fuel should have run out on this plane. Whisper data comes out a couple years ago. Based on that, they think there might have been a 22-minute holding pattern from 8:12 to 8:34.
Oh.
Where it looks like the plane just kind of circled for 22 minutes.
No. Interesting. No.
Yeah.
Is that something that cruise control could do? Just circling like that?
I have to ask Captain Fred.
I mean, it does seem kind of purposeful, but then also if this was a hijacking or terrorist attack, and that's why they had this purposeful, like, hold. I guess my issue with the hijack is that we never got like a message, right? And so it's not a very effective attack if you don't get your message out there. No one's taking responsibility for this or anything like that. But I guess some of the newer theories is maybe during this 22-minute holding pattern, someone was talking to someone else. Like perhaps whoever had control of this plane was talking to the Malaysian government for 22 minutes.
Oh,
and now they've all just like covered it up. I don't know. So we don't know what was happening there. I guess maybe if something like that did happen, it makes it a little more believable that this could have potentially been like a hijacking or politically motivated for whatever reason. And like the public just never heard that message because it's been covered up. But again, we'll get deeper into our theories next week. There were some less popular theories that the plane went north. When we talk about the handshake transmissions and kind of that radius, the 7 rings, it could have gone north. But everyone seems to agree, particularly with this newer whisper data, that the plane probably did go south and did go down in the ocean. I mean, if it went south, it had to go to the ocean because there's literally nothing else out there. And if it did go into the ocean, we don't really know if it was like a controlled descent or an uncontrolled descent. So if it was an uncontrolled descent, which is the primary theory, it could have been a suicide mission, but crash into the ocean at supersonic speeds would cause the plane to shatter into a ton of pieces, and it'd be a pretty painful way to go. So I think I hope it was a suicide mission and that the pilot just killed him. If it was a suicide mission, I hope that like the pilot killed himself and his passengers in a more peaceful, painful way.
Than a terrifying descent into the ocean.
Yeah. So again, if they determine this was an uncontrolled descent, it does not necessarily rule out suicide. And if something had happened and everyone on board was dead, an uncontrolled descent is how the plane would have had to have gone down. Alternatively, it could have been a more controlled descent. So if the motivation was like, you know, Captain Shah just wants to make this plane disappear and be a part of like the craziest aviation mystery in history, then like a nice gradual glide into the ocean would really minimize debris, make the plane tougher to find. Or if they were like trying to land this plane somehow on the water, like a Hudson situation. Again, a more gradual descent would be the way to do that.
That's just so interesting. That's like landing a plane like sort of slowly on the water so that it just goes missing.
Yeah, I mean, that would be kind of a like crazy motivation.
Right. And also like knowing that that's just how you're going to die.
Just waking up and being like, my goal is just to make this plane disappear so people will be talking about me on a podcast in 15 years.
Yeah, but also like wanting that to be how you die.
Yeah.
Drowning.
Yeah.
They say that's the worst way, isn't it?
Yeah.
That feels to me like it'd be the worst way.
Yeah.
Either that or burning alive.
Yeah.
Ugh. I've thought about this.
I always think about the ways I'd like to die because I've talked about this in my personal life. I'd like to exit the world in a crazy way, like getting stepped on by a moose. What was one that I talked about?
I just want to fall asleep.
Getting eaten by my cat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
that's how you want to die, is your cat?
I just would like to have
a
story of some way. Like, Aunt Colleen fell off a roller coaster.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like,
Uncle Shah just disappeared.
Yeah.
And no one could find him.
Yeah. I'd like a little bit more spice in that, but yeah.
Okay, interesting. So initially when they found some airplane debris, it was intact. So people thought this must have been a controlled descent. But I think now with all the other evidence we have with this whisper data, people are leaning more towards this was probably an uncontrolled descent and the plane was just descending so rapidly that the pieces of the aircraft flew off before the plane hit the water. And that's the reason that a lot of the debris we have found is not more damaged. So yeah, the pieces flew off before we could have this aggressive descent into the water.
Again. Just terrifying.
But I mean, based on like all the amount of like small pieces they found, that feels more correct. But...
Yeah. Now, even with the controlled versus uncontrolled descent and all this data we have, I think in the last couple of years, they've really narrowed this down to a potential area where this plane could be. But that still allows for a 200-kilometer possible variation of where this plane could have entered the ocean based on whether it was controlled or an uncontrolled descent.
That's crazy.
So still a pretty large area. Definitely narrows down the search area, though.
But that doesn't explain the 22-minute holding.
I can't explain the 22 minutes.
Yeah, that's weird to me.
The only thing I can think of is if like if he was like an hypoxia theory or something, if he passed out, could he like have pushed the throttle, like slumped over and pushed the throttle and it caused it to spin? But I don't even know if that makes sense. We'd have to run that theory by someone who flies planes. Listeners, reach out to us. Let us know.
You fly a plane? Let me know.
We want to hear from you.
Have you ever flown a plane before?
Yeah. Have you ever flown something before?
So also, I just wanted to comment on this. We'll talk about how I think this whole investigation was botched, but most of these families that were interviewed found out their loved ones were missing and then eventually presumed dead from the press. Communication was just like terrible. In fact, I think 2 weeks after the plane disappeared, when they determined that everyone on the plane was probably dead, they just sent out an SMS text message to all the family members saying like, yeah, we're going to assume all your family members are dead. So, I mean, that's kind of harsh.
That's so messed up.
Yeah.
It's like your table's ready. Your family's dead.
We don't mean to laugh. That is terrible.
Yeah, we have trauma.
There was one guy who was a source in the Netflix documentary who I'm not going to talk too much about because I don't really believe his theory is pretty out there. But even he was like, never in the history of the world has someone just been told their loved one must be dead because of math. And I thought that was like pretty legitimate. Like, we've never just been like, well, you know, your dad's dead because math tells us he's probably in the ocean. And that's enough for us to just like wash our hands of this whole investigation and be done with it. These families want to know what happened. I think there was also some theories that maybe the plane had gone north and could have landed. So some of them might have been holding out a little bit of hope for that. I think there's just definitely better ways they could have handled it than an SMS message. There were some people who, like family members of passengers or friends of passengers, who said that they did try to call people on the plane once they found out it was missing.
Wait, really? Like, were they able to get through? Did someone just like call their parents?
No one ever answered. But they did say the phones were ringing. Like, they didn't just go straight to voicemail.
What?
Yeah. So,
well, like if your phone is in water, does it act like it's off or does it act like...
interesting side story.
You know what I mean? Like,
so I was thinking it was on the bottom of the ocean that it would have had to die. Probably like the pressure from being that far down in the ocean. Side story, I did go kayaking in Mexico.
Right.
And as I was stepping off the dock, my cell phone slid out of my pocket.
Oh, no.
And the young kid who was working was like, there's alligators in that water. I'm not going in there. Oh. And so I was trying to get my phone. I was unable to get it. These two girls in their honeymoon from Minnesota showed up, and the one was like, I'll get your phone for you. Like, we're going to go for a ride, and when I come back, I'll look for it. So then I kind of gave up. Also, my cell phone was like, it was like a wallet container. So like all of my driver's license cards.
No.
So we go back to the hotel and we're at the pool and we're walking back to a room. And again, this kayak place was not even like at our hotel. It was like, there were probably like 5 hotels that kind of shared this kayak space. So we're walking back to the room and these two girls walk up and they're like, Megan? I'm like, yeah. And they had my phone. They said they were on their honeymoon. The one girl was like, my wife can't like sit still, like she has to have a project. And after she had been diving around for quite some time in the alligator infested water to get me my phone, she goes back to her hotel. She sees one of those nets at the pool, goes back to the kayaking place. She said first, the way she tells the story was first pass. She scooped up my phone. So at this point, it had probably been in the water for like 5 hours.
And it still worked?
It was on.
What?
Phone was on when she scooped it out. And
what kind of phone? What year iPhone are we talking about here?
This was an iPhone, and let's say it was 5 years ago.
Oh, because they did at some
now
point,
they're waterproof. I think this was before that.
Then,
before that.
That's great.
And I used that phone for 2 more years.
Oh
wow!
So first of all, that story, I love that story because it just gives me. My friend who was with me started crying because she was like, "I have faith in humanity now." Right? I was like, that is pretty cool that this person was like, I'm just going to help that girl. So go back to the question. Do you think the phone, if the phone was in the bottom of the ocean, would it ring?
It still ring? I don't know.
I don't think that there's cell service at the bottom of the ocean, right?
No. And I think that's, again, this ocean is very scary and very deep. And I think there's also like a pressure issue, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm a no for the
cell.
Yeah.
Well, so then why do you think the cell phone was ringing if it shouldn't work in the bottom of the ocean?
Because they went through a black hole, Megan.
Whoa. But there's cell service in the black hole.
Maybe. We don't know.
Okay. So anyway, the airline has since come forward to apologize for like their poor communication. They were like, we're really just focused on finding this plane. So they do acknowledge that they did drop the ball. But again, I just think very few positive things that the Malaysian Airlines and the Malaysian government did as far as like addressing this entire catastrophe.
Wait, I have a theory. What if a whale ate the cell phone.
No.
Did you guys just see that video where the shark ate
Eaten by a whale.
where the shark ate the camera
No.
and it like filmed the inside of the shark? We'll look it up later.
Wait, did it poop it out?
No, he spit it out. Camera back up.
I want to watch that. So
Also, they flew over so many airspaces on this flight path. Again, it was like the intersection of multiple airspaces. But no one has really produced any good radar evidence. They flew over an Australian airbase, Butterworth. And so, again, you would think if there's like an Australian airbase and this rogue 777 just flies over your base, like someone would be alerted.
Right. Who's in our airspace?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there were a couple of large U.S. military exercises that were happening in the area at the time. So there was a lot of military personnel in a pretty concentrated area. And again, like, how could nobody have seen anything? It's all just very weird. So again, the initial search was really difficult because all this information came out over a very long period of time. They initially just had that radio transmission to go on, and that was it. And so that's where they had to search. And then they would just kind of keep moving their search, like I said. But by the time they kind of figure out all this information about where they think the plane went down, now we have to deal with like the currents and the movement. So I think very challenging. But there was a search and rescue group, a lot of Americans and Australians involved in the search and rescue, the whole operation. And it was done on a volunteer basis. So it was a fee for find basis, meaning they weren't going to get paid unless they found the aircraft. So just to reiterate, like, them searching is not costing the Malaysian government anything.
yeah.
It only is going to cost them something if they find the plane. So this group searched 4.5 million kilometers.
Oh my goodness.
What is that in like miles?
Well, a 5K is 3.14 miles, right?
So a shit ton of space.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh.
their search area was larger than the size of the United States.
Oh my.
And then they did like 120,000 kilometers of surface search, just like setting their cameras down to the surface of the ocean floor.
Oh my
Again,
God.
This is becoming more and more a black hole theory.
I don't know. I don't know about that one.
But what I don't like about this is that these searchers, they didn't want to stop the search. Like, I know they hadn't found anything, but they wanted to keep going. And it was the Malaysian government who halted the search.
No, that's a red flag.
Yeah, weird.
That's a red flag.
Like, what is the harm in letting these people look?
They were definitely afraid of this group finding something.
Yeah, what were they trying to hide, you know?
Red flag.
I guess what the Malaysian government said when they called off the search was like, we will allow the search to resume once we obtain credible evidence. But for now, the case is closed. So first of all, you're not searching. You're not like, how are you going to find evidence to resume the search if you're not looking?
Yeah.
And like, number two, how are you calling this a closed case when they literally 4.5 years after the accident released this massive report saying, yeah, we don't know what happened, inconclusive.
No. That's
How do you say case closed? We aren't going to find out what happened to your friends and family. See you later. Like, none of it makes any sense to me.
too suspicious.
Yeah. Don't be suspicious.
Don't be suspicious.
And then actually, really, let's make a number three. This whisper data has since come out, which again was kind of verified with the oceanography data. So we do have some critical information. We've narrowed down this to this 200-kilometer area, which seems so vast when we talk about how big 200 kilometers are. But compared to what they searched, like, this is probably nothing to them. So why won't they just allow them to resume the search? Also, there was really no information for about 16 months. And then 16 months after the disappearance, this debris washes ashore on the French territory of Reunion Island, which you see all these documentaries or you see these pictures online. I guess when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's not very far. But then when you really look at the map, that's like a massive distance for this debris to travel. The first alleged piece of airplane debris was the flaperon.
Flapper on, flapper off.
Yeah, if you like sit over the wing of the airplane, you can see it moving. It like makes that
Oh, that's
noise.
that little.
Yeah, it's like for the landing gear.
Yeah.
So the fact that the debris washed up, it really tracks with the oceanography data, the Inmarsat data, the Whisper data, all really kind of confirms this suspected 200-kilometer location that we can't search. But here's where it gets interesting. And you guys tell me what you think about this, because I could go one of two ways. So there's this American who allegedly, maybe, possibly had Russian ties.
Oh, no.
What? It's always Russia.
Yeah. And he claims, he's like, I'm just an adventurer. I wanted to do something. And so he sees this flaperon, which had washed ashore. It was on the news. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to go help him. I'm going to find some more pieces of this airplane. And so he spent 2 years working with that Australian oceanographer who the Malaysian government didn't want assistance from. He spent 2 years working with them. And then they keep giving him all these places where they'll be like, we think there could be more debris on this island or this island. And he goes to these different islands and he just searches. So again, the Australians would be like, this island is probably where something's going to wash up. And he would go and he'd find some local and be like, where do the fishermen check their fishing nets? And where are things washing ashore? And he would just walk around and find these airplane pieces. So in total, there have been 33 pieces of debris that have washed ashore on a variety of different islands, which could be parts of the plane. But they've really only been able to validate a couple of them.
Also, like, side note, where do they get the money to do this? Like, I'm just hanging out for 2 years.
Yeah, he's just exploring.
It's rich people.
Goals.
He's a trust fund baby or something.
Oh, you think?
You know what I mean?
You think?
Or
that's
Russia.
rich
Is Russia giving him
Oh, Russia. The Nazi gold?
the Nazi gold?
Oh, God.
Okay, so 33 items have washed ashore. Not really been able to validate them as all coming from this plane. I think a couple of them they have. But of these 33 items, 20 of them are found by this one man.
What?
Yes.
He planted that.
So one of the theories is like, is this guy a Russian who's just planning shit, or alternatively, is this just incompetence? Like the largest search effort ever, no one could find anything, and it just takes some guy getting off his couch and like walking the beaches to find 20 pieces of airplane debris.
Oh, wait, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't, like, of those 33 pieces that were found, like, weren't like 3 of them only confirmed to be MH370?
Correct.
Oh.
And then there's like some likely, highly likely, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So again, this guy is either up to no good or he's the only competent person involved in this whole search. And
No good.
I think the Russians have in the past done this. They have placed evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Tampered with the evidence.
Cover up
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the other thing to note, though, about all this debris that was found, there was like maybe one that had like 1 or 2 tiny little burn marks, but for the most part, none of this debris had had evidence of fire on it. And so if you're going with this like catastrophic event as your theory and you think like the plane blew up, you would expect there to be a lot of charred debris, and there really wasn't any. There's a lot of pictures of this guy posing with these pieces.
No way.
You know who else there's a lot of pictures of?
Who?
The Malaysian government, looking real proud of themselves.
No.
About what?
They like would have all these press conferences where all the bigwigs would get together and they just be like, we don't know anything, no updates. And then they would just like get together and grin and smile and look like just like a bunch of pompous assholes.
Literally did nothing.
Yeah. You didn't alert anybody.
Yeah.
Like you didn't tell anyone this was going on initially. You didn't communicate well with any of the families. You halted a search that was of no expense to you. And I mean, there was a lot of searching, but it wasn't like the Malaysian government searching. It was like the Australians and the Americans and all these other countries involved. And I just can't get over that. Like that you would call off a search of no cost to you. And then 4.5 years later, they released this massive report of what they think happened. And again, didn't really provide any information. It said there was no evidence that the pilot committed suicide. Everything was pretty inconclusive. And the only thing it said was that, like, yeah, the air traffic controllers were kind of delayed in figuring out this plane was missing. What is really interesting is the Australian Prime Minister said that about 4 days after the crash, the Malaysian Prime Minister told him that this was likely murder-suicide by the pilot.
Yeah.
Or I guess he was like, it's probably murder-suicide. But the Prime Minister of Australia was like, honestly, I didn't even know we were still talking about this. Like there was still an investigation going.
He was like, is this still a thing? Come on, guys. Joke's on you. It's 2024. We know what happened.
Still a thing. So that's what we've got. We're going to leave it there. Let you guys mull over all of that. A lot of information.
Next week.
And then, yeah, what do you guys think? Come back next week?
Yep.
Next week.
Yeah. And we'll talk about our theories. Kate, anything for the people?
Yeah. After you're finished with this episode, go ahead and like swipe down, leave us a 5-star review, give us a little comment if you'd like, or share the pod wherever you see fit. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thanks. We'll see you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.
Bye.